Hello everyone, welcome. Let us continue with the Still Red story. Years later, I learned that some in the pack had argued for me to be sent away because the old woman said I needed professional help. This is why most of the Red stories start with Granny sending the girl into the forest. It's also why I never trusted storytellers. The only reason to start the story there is if you think that old bitch had a point. What she had was an agenda. Why do you think she gave me the knife? To the credit or damnation of the trial attorneys, they did not send me away. I'm not certain now, for the vantage point of age, which choice would have been better. Being locked up or sent away to parts unknown. At the time, the mere mention of being sent away terrified me. I knew only too well what happened. I also did not ask for clarification because I'd learned that words were useless. Things, excuses, wishes, hopes, sometimes promises, the stuff of stories. And what was the point of a story? I told the old woman the truth, and look where that had gotten me. The only way to make a point was with my fists and my feet. But even that, that choice had been, let's say, hard. By now, you must have realised that my truth, my story, is nothing like the familiar version. Girl Cape, Basket Woods, Wolf. Perhaps you prefer it if I made Granny into a kindly old thing, or shall we transform her into a wily and clever woman? Dream on. Perhaps you like my story if I turned it into an action-adventure thriller where I picked the lock and escaped, how I disguised myself as a wolf. I do not trust stories. For me, all memory begins in the dark, in the woods. Here's the truth. I dreamed in my little bed while locked up in my little room inside the wolf den. Dreams that helped me pass the time, while the trial attorneys held the threat of exile over my head like an axe strung from an exceedingly thin piece of thread. Yeah. I would stop fighting. I'd learn to be good and behave. It meant to be quiet. Don't talk. Don't cause trouble. And above all, never ever tell anyone what you did in the woods. Not what the hunters had done. What I had done. Things so bad they must never be spoken aloud, let alone remembered. A story so terrible, the very telling of it became a weapon that might harm others, like the knife that rested in my basket. But I was still Red, and Red's story was my story. It was the only story that mattered, and it was the only story I could ever tell. But I was not allowed that. So I could never tell. From this knot there was no escape. Alone in my room, I tried to forget, but it wasn't easy. I pushed the memories away, but every night they rushed back in. In my dreams, I fought back, but the hunters always came for me, over and over. I ran, and they caught me, overwhelmed me with their cruel strength until everything went mercifully black. Then it would start, all over again. This was how I did my time. Some people call it childhood. I watched endless hours of television until the shows and characters blurred one into another because I feared sleep and the evil that rolled along behind. When I'd lain awake for days, my body tight as a prowling wolf, an unseen door opened in my mind. From it came a little girl who looked remarkably like the 3-year-old I had been once upon a time. Her feet were bare and bloody, and a dog collar hung about her waist. She carried the basket to me, pulled me away to the red checked cloth. We both stared at the long and wicked knife. We both knew why the old woman had put it in there in the first place, what she expected of me. Still, I could not behave. But I found a use for the knife, certainly not what Granny had in mind, and not as final, at any rate. I used it to chop up my memories into tiny bits. When I was done, I folded the knife carefully in the cloth and slept. I did not wake up for a long time. When my keeper finally opened my little door, I emerged a pale and quiet girl who never fought and rarely spoke. The trial attorneys were pleased with the result. Their solution had worked. What remained of my childhood was spent alone. It wasn't so bad, because I wasn't outdoors. I wasn't in the rain, and there were no hunters about in those days. The cave was clean and dry. I had a television and a lot of books. I was allowed out for meals and to go to school. I didn't have any friends because the other kids were afraid of the trial attorneys, and I didn't have much experience relating to people outside of books or a good fight. I kept my nails sharp. About the time I was supposed to graduate from high school, the trial attorney's worst fear came true. A hunter came for me. He was a big brood of a man. That's what they thought. Of course, when they saw him, he was a boy instead of a man. When he walked out of the dark woods, he looked like any other hunter because he carried an axe. Long and wicked looking, with a red handle. No one particularly noticed the axe. What interested them was that he also carried a notebook, which meant he had a plan. He had something to prove. He had to kill a girl, and he chose me. I don't know why. Over the years, I've wondered if the hunters who'd taken me later told the story of the girl who ran, the one they'd lost. Perhaps in this version, the boy heard the story around the campfire and vowed to find the girl who had shamed his elders, vowed to find her and succeed where the other had failed so long ago. Perhaps this happened. Or not. I will stick to what I know for sure. The day he walked out of the woods, there were names scratched in his notebook in blue ink. The name was what I noticed, what everyone noticed. The first line, the first page, was red. The hunter tracked me. When the trial attorneys learned of this particular threat, they promptly left me alone in the remote and lonely cave and waited in hiding for the inevitable. The inevitable took a while, but hunters were patient. Since I'm here to tell this tale, you've logically assumed the boy hunter failed. That is, you must assume the boy failed if you believe I'm telling the truth, because I cannot be like the poor Psyche's cat, both dead and alive at the same time. I cannot be red and not red. It must be one or the other. The two ideas fit together, like an hand to an axe. One evening, I returned home from school and found the hunter waiting for me. I ran, but he was faster. He threw a hood over my head. Blinded, I stumbled and fell. He scooped me up from the ground and threw me over his shoulder, set off at a furious pace. Soon the crunch of boots smashing through the crust of snow gave way to a thump and slide that slowed to a soft gravelly amble. We'd reached the lake with its frozen expanse frosted with delicate layers of fresh snow. His pace slowed even more, and I could feel his body tense as he picked his way across the ice. Fear radiated from his broad back with the stench of unwashed skin. Fear told me what to do. When he slid right, I rolled in the same direction, throwing all my weight against his grasp. Letting momentum set him off balance, we lurched sideways. His knees buckled, and I tumbled across the ice. I yanked off the hood and pushed away from the cursing, floundering hunter, scrambling until there was distance between us. He growled and struck out after me, lean and lethal against the flat white. I was lighter and faster, reached the centre where I knew. In the summertime, waters rippled over rocks far below the surface. The lake was deep here, but the current made for thinner ice. Thin, but strong enough to hold one smallish girl, I hoped. The hunter was only a boy, but tall for his age with big arms and legs, padded with dense muscle. He could not touch me here, not without breaking the ice, plunging to certain depth in the dark waters. That happened. He would take me with him, this was true, down into the deeps, past air and light and all hope of life, into the night tide. But that was a place I knew by touch. He stood there, thinking of blood and death, and roared his fury. It came to me that I should feel pity for him, some measure of compassion for a boy raised by brutes in the wild. They fed him cruel stories and handed him an axe and set him on a course that led to me. There were other stories, more true, if only I could make him believe. Faint hope bloomed that the truth might save me more surely than any blade. "Have you killed a girl?" I asked. He took a step and the ice cracked. Silence then, across the frozen lake. I shoved my hand into my pocket, brought out my knife. If he came close enough for me to strike him, would it matter? We would surely fall the ice and die together. "Have you killed a girl?" I asked again, a little more louder this time, more assertive. "No," he said, "but I will this day, and in so doing become a man." He took another step and the crack widened. I held my ground. This act of being cold and quiet, something I'd mastered during the long years I spent locked in the den, and called to him. "They told you lies. There are other ways to prove yourself and become strong." "Shut up," he shouted. "I'll have none of your tales." And with that he charged. The ice gave way, huge, jagged shards raking skyward as we fell, sinking into the deep black. The lake swallowed the boy's dark form. I waited for my mind to go, for the endless cold to steal my breath, for death to take me one last time. It did not come. What happened is that hands, hands like claws, bony and odd, gripped my legs and dragged me up and up till my head ploughed through wet sand that clogged my nose. When I could breathe again and my body stopped shivering, I scrubbed my eyes. I lay on the floor of a cave. Somewhere nearby, waves crashed against rocks. "We've got about 15 minutes. The voice sounded like gravel and sandpaper, sharp, full of acid and familiar. I pushed myself upright and stared into the ancient and ruined face of the old woman. 15 minutes for what?" I asked. "To decide if you want to live or not." "I don't understand." "Don't be stupid, child. You cannot trust her," whispered a voice that might have been inside my own head. Maybe it came from the walls of the cave. "You told her your story. You told her the truth and she betrayed you. I will not kill myself, no matter what you say." "Is that what you thought?" She chuckled with cool amusement. "I gave you a weapon, girl. I was a child. What did you expect me to do with it?" "I expected you to grow and bide your time and learn the strategy of patience." I stared at her in the shadows, the mass of frizzy white hair blown wild by the wind, and her small reddened eyes. "What are you?" She grinned a wolfish smile. Her teeth were like sharp mitts of yellowed ivory. "I am the girl who ran." And that's this part finished with. Thank you so much for coming back to listen. We'll continue with the next part soon. Many blessings.